But first, Barnaby Joyce said a very important thing yesterday, just after being sworn in again as our Deputy Prime Minister. He told a meeting of government MPs that to say, or according to those who were there, that what is required of them now is to make Australia as strong as possible, as quickly as possible, to protect our way of life. Now, that's not just because, as Joyce said, American power is declining and we could be on our own. There's something else, and everyone there knew what he was talking about. As I explained last night, we have to our north a very dangerous and aggressive Chinese dictatorship, fast building up its military, tightening the screws, warning its armed forces to prepare for war with Taiwan, an island democracy whose foreign minister says, yes, China is indeed preparing to invade it.
And recently they have increased their gray zone activities against Taiwan, and all these seem to be preparing for their final military assault against Taiwan.
But here we are in Australia with our pants down. Our new submarines from France delayed over budget, our new Joint Strike Fighters also in trouble. But as that report I told you about last night, the Rand Corporation won on our mobilisation plans commissioned by our Australian Defence Force, that report makes clear that our troubles go much, much deeper. If there is war, if we do need to switch to total defence, we are, to be frank, stuffed. Our plans to mobilise people and supplies to the war effort, they're way out of date. Our military doesn't even know exactly what experts they will need to draft in or how to do it. Our industrial base is now too small. We are dangerously reliant on supplies from overseas that can be easily cut off. Our petrol, our medicines, even things like microprocessors for computers. And this report said Australians themselves did not seem ready enough or united enough to help fight a serious war. I went through all this last night. But now with Barnaby Joyce back in Cabinet, that's at least one more person in that government who knows how urgently we need to prepare for the worst. And there are others who also know this. Senator Jim Molan, the retired Major General, he's warned about this for years. Andrew Hastie, former SAS captain, now Assistant Defence Minister. I even suspect Alan Tudge, the Education Minister, also knows that we'll need, just for a start, to kill off this new school curriculum that teaches children to actually despise their own country. Here is Tudge today.
Fundamentally, students should come out of school with the love of this nation and what we have achieved together.
But no one in government seems to know better that time is short and the need is great than Peter Dutton. He's been the Defence Minister for less than 4 months, but already seems like a man in a hell of a hurry. In that time, he's warned, bluntly, that we can't rule out China starting a war on Taiwan. He's boosted army morale by overruling a decision to strip the Special Forces of meritorious unit citation. He's banned woke gesture politics in the forces, saying, well, look, the job of soldiers, etc., is to focus on being able to fight. He's locked in a refit of our existing Collins-class submarines while we wait for the new French ones, and he's flagged bringing in more US troops on Australian soil so that they can react faster to a Chinese attack. Now, that's only some of it. And I feel that after a long, long period, we at last have an adult in charge of our defence. I'm joined now by Defence Minister Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton, thank you so much for your time. You seem in a great hurry, as I've just explained, all the decisions you've been making recently. What's been driving you? What is your concern, the need for haste?
Well, Andrew, I think there are a number of projects where we had concerns, and I want to rectify those quickly. I want to make sure that we have a successful pivot. We've had 20 years in the Middle East, which is a particular style of conflict and battle engagement, and that is now over. So the threat for us is in the Indo-Pacific, and we need to be realistic about what the coming decades might hold. We need to be prepared for any eventuality there, and we need to make sure that the Defence Force is absolutely focused on that task. And so For many reasons, I believe that we should make the decisions to deal with those urgent issues and to allow the Defence Force to do what it does best to keep Australians safe, and they've done that for generations, and that's what we ask of them and what we respect them so much for doing. And I think we've got a lot to be very thankful for. Both our serving men and women and our veterans have made our country what it is today, so we owe them a great deal, as you know.
Yes, but it's the urgency that gets me. I mean, there's no doubt that you have put it on fast forward after we've been meandering for so many years. Now, last night I went through that Rand Corporation report that was done for the ADF. It makes clear that it thinks our armed forces aren't ready for a war of total defence. Our industry isn't ready. Australians are not ready. Do you agree that our mobilisation plans are in a real mess?
Well, Andrew, a couple of points. I mean, one is that Australia wants peace in our region. We want to make sure that we work with our near neighbours. We don't tolerate a compromise of our sovereignty. We're already seeing a 60% increase in the number of ransomware attacks from both state actors, including Iran and China, North Korea and others. Sophisticated crime groups as well, targeting Australians online, attacking health and aged care facilities, hoovering up information. So we're already, if you like, in that battle. And I think Australians should be very clear about that. And so there's an enormous amount of effort that we've put into the cyber defences for our country. And not only our defences, but also the offensive capacity that we have to disrupt these crime groups and others that would seek to do us harm online. So I think that is a really important point to make. Secondly, we want to make sure that if we're making decisions about procurement today, about investments, and we're putting $270 billion in over this decade into equipment for the Australian Defence Force. In many cases, that can take a number of years lead time before we take possession of that particular equipment. So I want us to be in the best possible position. Whatever might happen in the next decade, the decade beyond, I'm dealing with decisions now on subs or frigates, for example, that would have been taken many years ago. And I want to make sure that we've got every capacity and capability within the Australian Defence Force. And I think the Prime Minister's been very clear about that as well.
Yeah, I've got that. And of course you would want to do that. But what I'm struck with is this report saying, look, if the worst comes to in the past, we've had defence commitments in Iraq or Afghanistan or East Timor. They're not existential threats to us. We could do it, we could not do it. It's not about getting the homeland or, supporting our troops. We can do it. But this report makes clear that in a war of what it calls total defence, where we are really committed, where we feel, well, it doesn't mention China, but if it's a war with China, for instance, we are not prepared. Has this been worrying you too? It says, for instance, we haven't got a narrative there to get people invested in the idea that we are going to have to help our armed forces.
Well, Andrew, look, let me deal with it this way. In extremis, we have an unbreakable alliance with the United States of America. We have a very significant relationship with our Five Eyes partners otherwise, the United Kingdom, Canada, and obviously we would rely on allies to provide us with assistance. If there was to be a conflict with a major power, there's no sense pretending that Australia could outstock the United States or China or somebody else in terms of our weaponry. I mean, that's just not realistic for a population of 25 million people on an island nation in the middle of the Pacific. So it's what makes our engagement and the depth of our friendship with the Americans so important. So that needs to be taken into account as well if you're asking about what would Australia's preparedness be for conflict within our own region. So the first priority is to maintain peace, to exert pressure to make sure that that peace is sustained, to make sure that people understand that if they were to inflict pain or attack Australia, that there would be a very high price to pay for that, either through the capabilities, some of which you talk about we are deficient in, and I'm making a very concerted effort to make sure that we can patch up that gap, and equally to do more with our most important ally, the United States.